Upstream has partnered with Scale Space this morning to bring you this London Tech Week event, and there couldn't be a more perfect place to do it than in Scale Space White City for our panel discussion, Can Your Location and Who You Are Co-Locating With Boost Innovation? So Scale Space is a unique proposition that brings together venture builder Blenheim Chalcott, Imperial College London, corporate innovators and growing businesses, both in an online and an in-person community. In today's session, we're going to hear from those who are building and studying the importance of location and co-location, and also those who are directly experiencing and benefiting from it. Our four speakers today, to begin with, are Dr. Michelle Brogan, who is Associate Professor of Strategy and Entrepreneurship at Imperial College Business School. Michelle was previously at the University of North Carolina, and prior to that at INSEAD. And her research centers on how individuals and firms' social capital affect entrepreneurship and innovation. Our second speaker is Henrik Hagemann, who is CEO of Pure Affinity, which uses a unique biochemical engineering process to engineer advanced materials and is optimized to capture specific pollutants from water and wastewater. Pure Affinity started at Imperial's iHub, and they are just about to move into Scale Space, or have you moved already?
We've just started coal construction.
Just okay, soon to hear. Now, on the panel, we also have Mike Holmes, who was Chief Commercial Officer of Scale Space when we first put him on the panel. And as of last week, he's been promoted to CEO of Scale Space, which is obviously because we put him on the panel. Cause and effect, yeah, there we are. Jokes aside, congratulations, Mike. Mike was previously holding commercial and strategic positions at PwC and Tesco. Now, we'd love to have her here in person, but she's got a case of COVID in the family, so we're going to hear her until hopefully we can see her, but if not, we will hear all her experiences and as a spokesperson this morning for Novartis UK, and that is Dr. Samin Syed. Yes, she's on screen. And she is UK Chief Scientific Officer and Medical Director for Novartis UK, which has its HQ in White City. And prior to this, Samin worked at a number of well-known pharmaceutical companies, including Merck and GSK. A bit of context around what we're talking about today is that we've witnessed a great many changes in White City over the last 18 months of the pandemic, and it's changed the way we feel about work, the way we think about where we should work and how we should work. Yet we know instinctively, and also through academic studies, that location and co-location matter to the relationships that spark innovation, creativity, and partnership, and which in turn bring social, environmental, and economic improvements. The life sciences sector is a growing, and from my vantage, an increasingly cohesive part of the ecosystem in the White City Innovation District. And that's why, through Samin and Henrik this morning, we are focusing on lessons, experiences, and ambitions from the sector, which are equally applicable to the wider tech sector. We've got three interconnected questions for today's panel. Our first, we're going to try and do it this way, which is we're going to give Samin the first question to kick off, and then the next two we will get the panel in, and then we'll get Samin. Hopefully we'll make the feed less jumpy this way. So the first question, and it's to kick off with Samin, it's about co-location by building and by postcode. And I think the question is very much, what are the benefits of locating your organization in a building and a district designed like White City to fuel growth, and where you are actively co-located with like-minded peers at similar, but also different stages of growth? Samin.
Thank you very much for that question. I trust you can hear me well. I'm going to do the whole mute thing. So yeah, I think it's a great question. And I guess just to give a bit of background for people in the audience, Novartis is a global company headquartered in Switzerland. We have a lot of our early discovery work based in the US. In the UK, we are very much a kind of commercialization arm, but we work very, very closely with our trial group. I mentioned that we're tapping into the health data for life sciences ecosystem in the UK. Now, we were initially located in this tiny little office in Frimley, and we made the decision to move to White City for the very purpose we're here today, which is talking about co-location. We really believe and still have the ambition of being able to partner with our neighbours. We chose White City because we knew that there was a growing life sciences hub here. We wanted to be close to Imperial, we wanted to be close to the various other startups and biotechs, all at various stages. The sad truth of the matter is we moved just before COVID hit, so unfortunately we weren't really able to realise that ambition. We still have the ambition. But what we have been doing is kind of continue the dialogue through the pandemic with our partners at Imperial to look for those opportunities that we can find those common projects and opportunities to drive innovation. We've used the fact that we're sat in White City with our global colleagues as well, so we are very well connected into some of our early discovery business development colleagues. And in fact, just prior to the pandemic, we held a networking event for the sole purpose to really understand and learn about the area, where there are any opportunities for us to connect and partner and drive innovation. And I think to say actually there were some opportunities that came out of that, and our global colleagues are working very hard behind the scenes to progress ideas. So hopefully we can hear more about those in the future. So in answer to your question, the ambition is there. We really believe that being close to your neighbours really helps foster that collaboration, partnership and innovation. We hope to do more once we are fully functioning and back in the office. But at the moment we haven't quite fully realised that ambition, but absolutely believe that's the way forward.
Okay, thank you, Sabine. And I think at this point it's useful to bring Henrike, who has been here a bit longer, and could you give us a sense of the journey and what your thoughts are?
Yeah, so when we first moved to the Innovation Hub, we were coming out of the old South Kensington incubator for Imperial. And it was really a choice of going to White City or going somewhere else within the UK. And part of what drew us in was the opportunity to have something actually built around us. So the building you see next to the Innovation Hub is this bioengineering campus with 11 stories of researchers. It wasn't even built at that time. And we saw this great vision that others also saw for being able to co-locate with researchers. So we moved in 2017, and we basically have done everything from collaborative PhDs to master's students. We've had slews of internships, maybe like 5 internships in one summer, all from the collaboration with the Imperial ecosystem. And then, yeah, as recent as today, I've had a call with one of the other spin-outs from Imperial where we're comparing notes about their shareholders and our shareholders and whether they want to bring in some of our shareholders, some of our VCs into their conversations now about their next fundraise. And it's definitely, so it contributes on multiple levers. I think one benefit, just going to Samir's point, is it's not just talent. Talent is one, obviously, but for us, we brought in a big US corporate VC as a consequence of the introduction from the Imperial ecosystem. And that is hard to foresee when you choose a location that you're going to have this introduction and it's going to lead to like one of your cornerstone VCs. But I think those are sort of the additional perks, I guess, of being in a cluster.
Yes, and we don't always know them when you first arrive, isn't it? You come for this and you stay for X, Y, Z.
Yeah, and it's to that point of why co-locate when we could all be remote? What are the chances of having that sort of chance encounter where you can meet up for dinner or you can meet someone in the hallway where they're like, oh, we have this delegation from the US right now. That sort of on the spot fortunate encounters is hard to engineer when you're remote entirely.
Thank you. Mike, can I come to you? What's your take on the question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really one of the reasons that Scalespace exists is because of some of the points that Henrik raised. This entire building was designed around optimizing for accidental collisions, and kind of that generates a lot of networks, creativity that would never happen in a remote environment. Ben and Charles, the co-founders of Scalespace with Imperial, they have 20 years of experience of building businesses and have consistently co-located those businesses because they know that results in positive outcomes in terms of sharing networks, sharing ideas, even kind of you gather service partners around that ecosystem and that benefits the community. So for a number of reasons, I think that co-location, particularly for companies that are either in a similar industry sector or a similar stage of growth, and for Scalespace it's all about supporting scaling businesses. I think there are huge positives from co-location.
Michelle, what does academic literature tell us?
What does it tell us? Well, we have a really good starting point, right? So the idea of how where you're located matters for how well you do at things. This has been the subject of study for sociologists for decades and decades. Everything from just understanding in an office setting something as silly as being close to the bathroom actually makes you'll be more central in the network if we look at it in the firm. I mean, it's totally ironic, but we have these funny things where microgeography, where we are in a place, can really matter for the amount of information that we get, for the interactions that we have, for the spontaneous interactions that you were talking about. But I think what the literature also helped us understand is, if we just speak generally about, location matters, or another thing that we hear a lot when we talk about entrepreneurship and innovation is, we need a diverse network, right? We've all heard that so many times. But what the academic literature helps us understand is some more of the nuance on that. So what we find is actually, yes, diverse networks are important, but they're not sufficient. One of my colleagues, who's actually with us today in the audience, Anna Terwal, has done some really fascinating research where he's studying entrepreneurs in London. He's found that the entrepreneurs who have a diverse, closed network actually perform better. It allows them to optimize on the benefits of diversity for new ideas, for new insights, but having that closure, the connectedness among people in a network allows for sufficient trust to develop. And what I think is fascinating about what's happening in White City is that's effectively what we're building here, is a diverse, closed network where the entrepreneurs in it hopefully will thrive.
Thank you. Which brings us on to the next question. We talked a little bit about how you benefited from the university being close by, and it's such a key player. Can we look at how university connections which fuel innovation, and particularly what are the competitive advantages of being university connected? So why do spin-outs, for instance, from Imperial College? Why do they come to White City? Why do they lay their roots down here? And what is it about proximity to a university that attracts others too? Michelle, I was wondering, could I perhaps
I can jump in again. And then I'm really interested to hear what Henrik is going to describe, because I think his company provides a great example of the general process that is in place right now at Imperial College. What's been developed, and it's taken time to develop, but over the past decade, we've had a number of different organizations that have all come together to support the entrepreneurial process at Imperial College. So if you could imagine yourself a student at Imperial College, you might be in an entrepreneurship course. So in a number of our programs, entrepreneurship is actually a core course. It's not just an elective. So you would take an entrepreneurship course, and as part of that, you would choose to work on a venture idea. You might then reach out to the enterprise lab and do what we call an idea surgery, where someone from the enterprise lab would sit down with you and really drill you on your idea and help you start to act, take it from idea to actually getting out there, engaging with prospective customers, or testing out the feasibility. So for example, they might send you over to the Hackspace, the advanced Hackspace, where you can prototype some things. If all is going well, then you might end up at the White City Incubator. That sounds very familiar to you, isn't it, Henrik? Yeah. And then after that, you might graduate into iHub or actually come over into ScaleSpace. And what I think makes a lot of schools have pieces of this, but the fact that we have them all together, and the fact that each of the organizations is not proprietary about their role, right? There's very much a common purpose, a willingness to work together that I think really, makes it really effective for removing obstacles for entrepreneurs at Imperial and helping them be more successful.
Okay.
I'll stir it up a little bit and just say, what is the reason for Imperial spin-outs, obviously, but what about the other spin-outs? They're actually also coming here. So we have in our building, let's say the Innovation Hub here, we have spin-outs coming from across the Golden Triangle seeking this spot. And I think the answer to that is as an entrepreneur, you have to think about, am I building this venture with a wave that's carrying me forward, so this sort of tailwind, or am I building it like with a strong headwind where like everybody thinks this economy or like this sector of the economy is going to shut down, sunset. And I think with this ecosystem that's coming up, it's that sort of wave of, yes, let's do something within life sciences. And you have it's a positive environment, obviously, but it's also actually it's helpful here and now. So it's like, oh, we have the service provider that this other life science company will also need, and we share those notes because it saves us time and it saves them time. And I think it's back to this sort of, we talk a lot about networks, right? Social networks and social media. That's true. The oldest network is the physical network of cities. And this innovation hub, or like, let's say this innovation district, is one node within this London network. And I think that's what really works quite well with Imperial being at the epicenter of that. So we have gone through that route of my first course at Imperial about entrepreneurship, where you have to put your hand up if you want to be an entrepreneur, and I was like, I'm not sure if I'm going to put my hand up. But yeah, I think they drill us through all those stages, and it's a bit like a pressure cooker. At every stage you would choose, oh, maybe I'm not going to do this venture. And there are companies, we need to talk about this as a collective, there are companies where the venture is not the right timing, the technology doesn't work something, but you find a quick answer to that. That's what this environment provides. You don't spend your time figuring out how to build a lab. You do the killer science experiment to figure out if your venture is going to be able to work at scale. And I think that's the sort of tailwind that this environment provides, in my view.
And one of the things is, Pure Affinity's been around for 6 years, is that 6-7 years?
Yes.
And I think you've also seen the type of support, the nature of the support, and then the terms of the support from Imperial evolve during that period. Could you perhaps share a bit more?
Yeah. So it always used to be this issue with the UK startup or spin-out ecosystem. Every single university wanted to take 50% ownership just to get started. And I think we used to have that model, and we were very early on in this curve of adoption of a more founder-friendly term. So I remember in 2016 I did this IP ambassador course with the UK IP office at Imperial, and part of what was the outcome was this conversation with the Imperial IP office and this new framework. So we now have a new framework with a founder's choice where you take 5% equity. And it's much more like the MIT, the Cambridge model, and it encourages a lot more volume in terms of spin-outs and more ownership. Okay, some new entrepreneurs, you're not going to get like us to take care of your patents, but if you do well with it, you really own a lot. And I think that's a very favorable development compared to just 5 years ago, and I hope this ecosystem can benefit from it.
And in answer to your first question, you said, well, it's not just about the talent, but the talent is obviously a critical piece of any organization. And do you take talent from Imperial? Well, obviously not solely, but what's the makeup of the team? And
So we're now 16 full-time, 17 actually, very soon, full-time people, and many of those have come through, they maybe done a master's with Imperial, where we collaborated with them, and then they would get to dry run, test the environment before they jump aboard into industry. There's this preconception that industry is like big and ambiguous and we don't know what it is from academia's perspective, and I used to sit in those shoes. So I recognize it from myself, and trying to just reduce the barrier between these two sectors, I think helps more talent move into industry where it's not so like overwhelming. So we've had postdocs, we've had PhD students, we've even like run these internship programs where maybe out of 5 we would offer a job to 1 or 2 who was a really good fit and who really enjoyed their work. And they can then join their first job as a graduate, knowing who they're going to work with, where it is, they don't have to relocate, and that they actually enjoy the science. I think those are some of the less spoken of benefits.
thank you. Now, like sales meets is obviously, there's definitely some rationale for sales meets being a joint venture between Imperial and then Talcott, but could we get a bit below that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the relationship goes back several years, kind of predates Scalespace by a number of years. And I think Talcott so many philanthropic businesses over the past decade or so have hired from Imperial and run structured internship programs in Imperial, and I think that was the kind of genesis of this idea of having London Chapel's new headquarters and many of its portfolio businesses alongside part of the business school. And I think access to talent, there's a lot of research that for scaling businesses that is a key pain point, and particularly at the moment for anyone who's part of a business that is trying to recruit is extremely difficult at the moment. It's a very competitive market. And I think Henrik made a really important point, I think, that a lot of the benefit is actually to do with saving time. If you're connected with the right person who's been through a similar experience or who's been through something that you need to face into, then you can jump straight to the answer, whether that's a coffee with Henrik and he'll tell you all of the programs, the types of people, who to speak to find out what internships might be available, versus a business could do that on their own 2 feet, but it's going to take them a lot longer and they might not find the right person. So I think that access to talent and helping provide access to that talent in the right way and shortcutting a lot of those processes is absolutely critical to why Scalespace exists. And I think as well that once you're in a community where other businesses have been through that, then it's just going to be much more natural. We put structured programs in place to support this, but I think that a lot of this will come from some of the CEOs talking to each other, sharing notes, the chief people officers getting to know each other, and then you just build a bit of a playbook around how this works, and that's what we're in the process of creating.
It's sometimes very difficult to map, isn't it, when you do see the benefits. Samin, at home, I was wondering how much of what you've heard strikes a chord with the Novartis experience or what you have in mind.
Absolutely, and I think there are 2 key areas for us, right? So I think one of them, you heard today all the exciting things that are going on and how White City are really trying to foster that kind of innovation network and attract people to come and start their companies here, and also Imperial's spin-out structure. So for us, it is about kind of coming in and not only just being part of the ecosystem, but how to build it. And as I mentioned in my opening gambit, that our global business development function is very much now linked in and sees those opportunities for startups and biotech. As a pharma company, we're often tackling quite big questions and quite big problems. So being able to partner with people who are also, I've heard the work with Common Purpose, have a similar goal in mind. So it just helps us kind of tackle those problems together. I think there's opportunities to do that here in the White City case. Not only just from the drug discovery, target, diagnostic, health perspective, but equally, we've heard a lot about the talent and knowledge perspective, and you're right, the market's highly competitive. And one of the things that we're actually doing right now is to map actually what are our gaps internally, and we can span from the scientific side of things, but business, data science. There are so many types of expertise and talent that we need in the house. So how do we start to build those networks with local, local organisations, Imperial or others? How do we set up internships? How do we set up that kind of knowledge transfer? How do we set up projects where we can get the right people in a room to really tackle those problems together? And that's something we're actually doing right now, so really look at that, and that's something that we can provide. And I think being close to Imperial, just over the road, and either use their facilities or they can come over and use some of our meeting rooms and really, really process that. So I think the two things for us is about kind of driving some of our pipeline and our innovation where we can, and building that community where we can, but also how can we really leverage the knowledge and the talent that sits in this hub and kind of cross-fertilise much more, which is something that we're really need to do.
Excellent.
Yeah, I just had one point to add on this, which is the perception of these sort of startups or companies that you can work in. Often the perception is you have this risk of what the company goes bust. Like most startups, they don't survive the first 5 years. And I think part of a location where there are multiple startups with a common purpose or within our common sectors, okay, maybe your startup didn't work, but your colleagues that are in the lab right next door, like literally the door next to you, they're growing, they're thriving, and they know you. They've seen you work hard, they've seen you work well with your colleagues, and so there is that sort of parachute of oh, potentially we can just locate or just move one lab door and it's similar team, but it's a different company name. And I think often that's a way to really, let's say, mitigate the risk perception, and that's a way to compete for talent. We're not just competing as a single company, we're competing as an innovation district. And that's much more palatable to most people if they want to relocate their family. We just had someone relocate from Bristol to come here, and it's like, obviously they're moving from a big corporate company, but yeah, there's us, and if it goes well, we'll grow, and if it doesn't go well, we'll just stay in the building, possibly, and go to the company next door.
And I think it goes back to the point made earlier around having those closed but diverse networks. You're right, it just means that if everyone has moved to this area, there are other opportunities, as you say, just this one thing doesn't work out. It means that there is a network of people, there are a network of companies, there are other opportunities for people to tap into, so I absolutely agree with that.
Would any of the panel like to come in?
I just have one point, which
Oh,
is,
yeah.
I think, one thing that we're often we're seeing the imperial ecosystem mature from entrepreneurship perspective, but also the academics. They're learning how to work with industry, be it large corporates or with startups. And I think that provides an additional benefit. We talked about facilities, which is you can access super high-end equipment for analytical things that you couldn't do otherwise. But really there's also that interface with startup savvy or industry savvy academics, because they have been trained for the last 5-10 years by Imperial, who have at their ethos, let's interface, let's have an impact with the science we develop. And obviously we saw it with the COVID pandemic, they really struck into let's help with the pandemic mode, but some of those learnings translate into other spaces also, and the academics actually, we're seeing they're very quick moving. Some of the perceptions around academia are not quite as bad as they used to be.
Oh, no, then comment. No, and I think, from the conversations upstream we've been having, the chemistry department, for instance, and you heard it here first, which is they're going to start a monthly drop-in clinic next month. And, one of the reasons, it's not reason it came about, but basically we've got a life sciences roundtable, we've got academia with, the practitioners, so that, here at medical school, Hammersmith Hospital, along with industry. And it's just, actually, you realise what an appetite there is for expert knowledge both ways. So that's one aspect. And also for those of you who haven't heard about the DigiFab, which is the new Imperial Materials Institute, and, again, there's very much, we are here to work with industry to get to know you guys, what your needs are and how we can work together. And it's turning all that, brain power up into actual products, which is so important for UK PLC. Now, I'm going into my own final question, but I forgot to announce at the start that actually we're taking audience Q&A after the third and final question. So it's always good if some people start thinking, so that when we're finished with our third and final question, we can come around to you with a movable mic somewhere and ask what you think. The third question is actually on innovation districts as growth drivers, and we're going to delve more into White City as an exemplar case for why investment in London and across the UK is required to create more innovation districts to boost the UK's post-COVID recovery. Now, I'm going to pause because I need to take 2 minutes to wear another hat, which is the upstream hat, and perhaps share a little about where thinking is amongst, people who are based here and the key anchor players. And if I start at the point which is, within a kind of local government perspective, White City is very much at the heart of Hammersmith and Fulham's industrial strategy, and it's the engine that will drive growth in the borough and across the UK more widely. And that's because, listening to, our 4 speakers today, what we have seen come about in the last couple of years is an unbeatable mix of academia, of entrepreneurs, established businesses, and arts organisations, and many long-standing residents who, from the conversations my team and I have had with them, have a strong sense of community, and they're keen to access the changes, the opportunities they now see taking place on their doorstep. And what we at Upstream and many anchor organisations believe is that this great mix, it's good, but what you also need is a collaborative, connected, and critically an inclusive approach that will allow organizations based here to make a positive impact more swiftly and effectively than anywhere else in the UK. And for that reason, we believe that this is a destination for pioneering businesses who want to make a difference, not just globally, but also within the community where they work and some people even live. As a way forward, what we're trying to do next is to turn all the anecdotal knowledge we've got about White City, which is, you've got a great space, I've got the 3D printers, I've got scientific equipment that I can let you use, into a map that reflects the richness of the innovation district. And we've also been bringing key players together for the last couple of years, whether it's by sector or whether it's by role in an organization, to talk to each other. And the next steps, I think, are very much to convene these anchors, these activist organizations, to make the vision a reality, with concrete commitments around collaboration and inclusive growth. So I think just taking a further step back, we've heard a lot about the government's levelling up agenda, and it's the right focus, but it also needs to be very much balanced with what is here and now and ready to go. And I think if you look at innovation districts like White City, they're geared up. They're going to be able to deliver to the UK's recovery pretty quickly, and there needs to be the right balance within government. So I'll get off my podium for a second, and I'm now going to turn to Mike and ask for his view on what does the innovation district mean to Scalespace?
Well, I think first of all, just seeing what's going on the White City campus, I joined Scalespace about 18 months ago, when it was a shell and core of the building, and now kind of look outside, we've got a sports pitch outside, we've got a big screen and deck chairs. And I think Imperial really has done an incredible job of leading the charge on what's going on here. And I think other UK universities should be looking at what's going on here and taking note. It's huge amounts of effort has gone into developing what we have here. I think that clearly, in order for an innovation hub to work, it needs to be an attractive place to come to work. You need to have amenities, you need to have facilities, you need that network in place. And there's further to go in White City, but I think that there's been huge acceleration across all of those dimensions. And I think other UK universities need to be kind of taking a look at what's going on here, and can have a huge role to play in transforming other cities around the UK into what White City is fast becoming.
So wondering whether you might bring Michelle in.
Well, I think, we've talked a lot about the infrastructure and the resources, and they're impressive, right? If you just look out the window, you can see new facilities being built all around us. But I think it's really important to go back to one of the words you were using earlier too, which is community. And that making White City work is going to be about building and sustaining a strong community. Obviously, the resources are an attractor, they get people here, but the sustainability of it will depend on having a strong shared purpose, identity, sort of trying to enact that vision that we all have, what we're trying to create as we go. So, yeah.
And I think we also, one of the things you perhaps look at is where companies go and where they stay. And we're getting a lot of interesting startups. How do we keep them here? And what are your words on that?
I think this is a really interesting question, because a lot of regions look to what happened in Silicon Valley years back, and they aspire to recreate that in their own location. And for the most part, that just hasn't happened. And that's not to say we won't be able to do that, but we need to think about not just trying to recreate a Silicon Valley, but creating an ecosystem that works well for all of the different stakeholders that we have here. One of the key things that has been identified in why other regions haven't been as successful has to do with finance and the type of finance that is available. So we talk a lot about venture capital as a source of entrepreneurial finance, but actually the minority of startups are funded by venture capital. And in fact, what we've seen in studies is that venture capital backed startups are actually much more likely to relocate outside of their original location. So as we look forward to what we're trying to accomplish in White City, I think it's really important to have conversations about the different types of options that need to be available to the entrepreneurs that choose to set up here for finance, not just relying on a VC model, but thinking about other forms of investment, other forms of access to these resources to not just have people found their businesses here, but actually be more likely to stay here. And I think, Henrik, you and I had a conversation as well about how the VC-backed ventures, these VC firms, they're operating under a very specific time horizon, and that can create tensions for venture teams, especially in life sciences or deep tech, right? You had
Yeah.
experience with
Yeah,
that.
so I had a call just this morning with one of the other ecosystem companies that are our senior by a couple of years. And they're saying, hey, we've been around for like a decade. Our investors are getting a bit like, yeah, we've raised tens of millions of dollars, but they're like, where's the commercialization guys? And for some companies, that is part of the journey. I think where things get interesting, what we're starting to see as a new trend is people are recognizing the benefit of building the company for value, for longer term, large outcomes, and there are new sources of capital entering this space. So who are some of the people that traditionally could take longer bets? Government, but also industry actually. So we see corporate VCs entering the space, coming in from abroad, investing in UK-based companies and asking them to stay, not asking them to necessarily relocate. And it's very close to my heart because one of our VCs is a corporate VC from the US Midwest. They've been doing material science for 90 years and actually asked us to stay in your district. We're not asking to relocate, but we are asking for a large outcome down the line, but it doesn't have to be within these 5-year cycles, 8-year cycles. And I think that's something we're seeing as a new trend. You're seeing other biotech companies taking on US VC investment and being asked to stay. It's a new trend. I think combine that trend with, obviously right now, we've just come out of a pandemic. Most people are like, let me work from home for all my life. And I think we will see that's an expansion in my view, and oftentimes these ecosystems expand and then collapse. And I think, let's say 3-5 years from now, I'm going to be a bit contrarian with you guys, I think we're going to see a sort of contraction in the opposite direction towards, wait, it is actually kind of nice to see your colleagues. It is actually like possible to do better innovation faster if you're in the same place in the beginning. And really starting at early stage startup is being in the mud, and you're trying to get through the mud to become like a small sprout. And I think these ecosystems in person will actually outperform, whether it will be a new Silicon Valley or new Boston. I think Boston is a good model for life sciences. Maybe that's what we want to strive towards. And then maybe we are going to be the more contrarian ones, saying, hey, actually, I think it is worth being in the same place, at least for 2 out of 3 days in the week, in order to achieve these larger outcomes. So I think combine that contrarian view with additional foreign direct investment from corporate VCs or other VCs that are not asking you to relocate, then you could have a powerful return to the UK PLC.
That'd be great. And I'm sure we'd like to have you here, not in Illinois, Iowa. But actually, we talked about leveling up agenda, and I think one of the things that Pure Affinity does is that you've got a team here, but you have a relationship with further up in the UK.
Yeah. So I think many companies, they get to a stage where either they need to relocate in order to do manufacturing. We scaled up to industrial scale manufacturing with tons per year capability during the pandemic, which was fun. But basically what we did is we have our back-end R&D and innovation efforts going on here, where we can handle some scale up of manufacturing of these granular media. But then we have in the northern UK, close to Newcastle, we have a manufacturing site.
Yeah.
And what that enables us to do is to scale up manufacturing within the UK, but also create additional jobs outside of just this golden triangle. And I think that's what we need to address as an ecosystem. We cannot only be leveling up these local hotspots. We need to think of how to create jobs, potentially with the bioeconomy, in these other sites.
Yeah.
And I think there's a massive opportunity for that. They're seeing it in the US. where some of the old blue collar work is being converted into new factories or fermentation tanks. And that to me is a really exciting prospect. And obviously, if we scale up manufacturing further, that's going to generate jobs in this sector. And I think, that would be nice to see.
And then within White City, I think one thing we've discussed is you do the internships, you're trying to outreach the community, and I know your team have, done apprenticeships and all. Well, what's the local impact of having Pure Affinity here?
Yeah,
What's it like?
So it's all of us trying to find a way to create additional links with the local ecosystem. So I'm a W12 resident, so I guess I'm an immediate link. But additional internships, apprenticeships, how do people get their first job? Just that first foot on the ladder. And it's also, to Mike's point, it is really like, in the beginning, you just need a job. Like, you just need to know a little bit about the space and then get started on something. And we have definitely, we're seeing that internship as one route, and you saw City as well. City of London, they did these 100 black interns in finance in City of London, and I think that was a great scheme. They're going to try and make it 1,000. If we can do something similar here in White City with biotech jobs, and we talk about the scarcity of talent, this is a way to turn on a new tap of freshly graduated people that I think would be exciting.
Okay, Sabine, we're going to bring you in. I think Henrik has laid out the gauntlet and the challenge. What's the Novartis take on this?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting conversation. It's interesting you use the Boston model because Novartis globally works very, very closely with Boston, and I kind of co-located when it comes to their research and development. And I think that's the question going through my mind, right? From a global perspective, when you think about where you want to collaborate in terms of science and discovery and innovation, we do think about London. When we think about London, but I guess the challenge we've got is how to make White City that kind of place within London to come to collaborate. And we've heard before there are a number of universities that are across London who also have a lot of the same expertise and academic interest and research being generated. So, the key thing for me would be actually the work that we're doing in White City. If there are these kind of key collaborations, key projects or key innovations that are coming out, how do we really sort of measure the success? How do we really look at actually what is that generating in terms of revenue in the city? How do we spotlight all of the good stuff that's coming out of White City to really further investment and also attract more into the area to really build White City kind of key hub within London? And I guess that's just the reality of the situation is that you work with they won't necessarily look at a particular district. And I guess that's the challenge we've got here today. Is how do we really kind of build that identity for White City. Those would be my thoughts on that. And I think we're on the way, right? There are things that are happening, and I think it's a really exciting place to be. But we've also got to recognise that there are other hubs in London, so how do we build our identity while connecting in with the other hubs that exist?
Michelle, do you want to perhaps come in on that particular, it's not just White City, there are other places in London, and what's the relationship? What's the
So I don't know if I can comment on what the current relationship is, but there maybe where we could bring it, what would be the ideal way to connect that at least looking at research on networks and innovation would be most likely to deliver higher performance for everyone involved. So over the past years, some of you may have read about this idea of small worlds and how important they are to innovation. So when we think about a small world, we're not talking about the Disney ride, not that one. Do you remember that one?
Yes, exactly.
So nothing as sweet as that. We're actually talking about a specific network structure, which is one where you have dense clusters of connections that are themselves connected by a tie that reaches out to another dense cluster. So not one big dense cluster of everybody together, but these sort of separate clusters connected over. It almost creates a sort of lattice structure, if you could imagine. And when we look in research across everything from the relationships among scientists within large companies to the connections among Broadway musicals, the teams of people working on those, we see that small world structures are associated with higher performance, higher innovation outcomes. So if we take that and we apply it to what we could aspire to in London, it would be to try and build that sort of small world structure. So to work on building a diverse closed type of network for White City, but to be sure that we have some members or some connections that allow us to leap into these other clusters across London and outward to other parts of the UK. And that seems to be where we all need to go. And I guess I'm looking at the audience here today and thinking about where do we go from here? And when everybody leaves the room shortly, this only happens through individual action. It doesn't happen because of some form of policy necessarily. It's really up to all of us to start to think about how we want to build our own individual level networks that will aggregate up to this beautiful small world structure that hopefully will help us reach goals.
Yeah, I wanted to add onto that point. It's also where we can see some of the finance aspect actually being an additional layer of benefits. So for us, we have a VC which is local in London. They're running an equitable venture model. So this is the Kindred Capital Group, where basically the startups get a stake in the other startups. They actually become exposed to the benefit of these other companies that are in this portfolio. And I think that's this is a really powerful way of connecting White City with other parts of the city. So we have another company in that group, much more progressed than us, based in Bermondsey. We go to see their labs and their space, and we work together. We have these founder peer support groups where we talk every 8 weeks about everything that's going bad. And that's a sort of closed network where it overlays with these physical networks. And I think that's a really important role that VC can play. It doesn't cost that much, and obviously it's a new model from Kindred with this equitable venture, but those alternative mechanisms, I think, is a strong way to complement this.
Thank you, that's really interesting. I am looking to the audience for, do we have any set of questions? Right, lady in front.
Hi. Hello. Can you hear me? Sorry. I'm Julie Zepton from Sense Future Team Communications Business. I'm very interested actually in how that discussion is developing around small world structures, and then you mentioning this financing side of like to eliminate that. I didn't quite catch that, but could you talk a bit more about the small world structures and how that then translates into international markets? The growing economy, please.
Michelle, do you mind? I probably should repeat the question just in case we wanted. So Teresa's question was around a bit more insight into the small world structure and how it translates internationally and
International markets.
international markets.
And I can't give you a very specific answer to that question, unfortunately. I don't know the specific literature that it would relate to international business. But what I think you would see is, again, this pattern where we all know the 6 degrees of separation story, that we're all connected to someone else through 6 degrees of separation. And a lot of us mistake that for the idea that we're all very well connected. And actually we're not, right? It's not that we're all very well connected. It's that most of us are actually connected to someone who is really well connected to a hub in the network, right? That's what underlies the 6 degrees of separation mechanism. So I think if we're thinking about how to build networks that will help do that local global connection, right? It's about ensuring that we have individuals that play those hub roles. It's a hub and spoke kind of system. But not everyone needs to be a hub. It's actually more efficient to have certain organizations or individuals who play those roles, and then the others can be more connected locally, and they benefit through that hub. So I would guess we'd see something like that, probably applies to international markets as well.
That makes sense. Thank you very much. Sorry. Can you just tell me the name of the company?
Kindred Capital.
Kindred.
Yeah, like Kindred Spirits.
I like Kindred.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Hi guys, first of all thank you for the wonderful discussion. Something that I'm quite interested in is when it comes to innovation going cross industry and what different industries can learn from each other and how they can innovate together. And we talked a lot about life sciences, we've touched on tech, but I just wanted to kind of get your take on how can other industries benefit from the model that is being built here in White City, and how can we all collaborate together, maybe from the creative industries to the life sciences to media, because there's so many companies and so many huge companies being based around here that I think it's one other thing to mention. Thank you.
So that's a question about cross-sector, cross-industry collaboration and how we facilitate that. Can I just ask where you're from?
Joanne, I run marketing.
You run around the marketing consultant. Yeah, no, I thought there was a more creative side coming through. I just wanted to ask you that. Okay, Eric?
Yeah, so I'm more anecdotal, so listen to the experts. But anecdotally, we're based in buildings where actually there are lots of creative. There is media presence, there is software as a service presence, there are like other sectors, and we often downplay that. We forget to mention, hey, White City is full of everything from the creative space to science, like hardcore science, trying to create new hydrogen storage. And when we meet up in these groups of 10 companies, within those 10 companies from our VC, not all of them are life sciences. And we find that there are so many similarities. Oh, they've had a commercialization effort that didn't turn out well. Oh, they had a team problem where they needed to rethink how to position their hiring plan. What is their fundraising strategy? And even though the players are slightly different and the jargon is slightly different, if you take a step back, it's building an organization and trying to catch these macro trends that's very much in common. And then, I guess in terms of the building itself, like this location, you actually have companies like Synthase just across in Westward in White City, being in the same building as large creative agencies, where they then learn from one another, and maybe the head of people from that group meets with the head of people from this other group, and the challenges are more similar than it would look like on the surface.
And I think the reason that Scale Space is focused on scaling businesses, so stage of growth as opposed to any specific industry sector, is as Henrik says, all businesses have the same core functions, and people in those functions, even in different sectors, have got a lot that they can learn from each other and exchange notes and ideas. So I think there's actually quite a lot of commonalities regardless of industry sector.
Michelle, Sabine, anything to bring you in? Okay, no, Michelle.
I mean, I think it's a great question, and there's certainly more that we could be doing as a people for pharmaceutical. And actually, one of the things that we probably could do with this creativity. So it's a great question. How do we kind of really build more of those networks and learn from each other? But again, as the other panelists have said, businesses all have things in common and all have things that they're trying to work towards. You can absolutely share and learn from each other. But it's got me now thinking a bit more about how can we actually collaborate much more with different sectors and learn from each other and how, better ways to solve some of the common problems that we face.
And I think another aspect of it is that, if you're looking for a marketing assistance, actually, if they're in the same space as you, there they are. You don't have to go and do a huge amount of scouting. And that. Do we have any further questions? Maybe.
Hi there, Andrea West, still working with Upstream at the moment. Just a couple of things, sadly, focused on you, Henrik, which are really interesting. The point you made about having your manufacturing somewhere else, I mean, it talks in a way to the small worlds bit, because this idea now that you can have distributed manufacturing, and particularly with circular economy, drivers coming in too, this becomes really important. But it means that you stay here, because then you're benefiting from all those different interactions, and the other place might also be benefiting there from whatever grouping it's in. So that seems to be really, really interesting. The other question, I think, is you're obviously benefiting from Kindred Capital and the way that they're working. What it feels like from what you were saying, and I don't know, Michelle, if you're finding this, but it sounds as though you're actually saying there's not enough innovation in finance that is really working for the kinds of activities and companies you are. And I think
you know, in addition to innovation happening within products, services, whatever, the innovation in the stuff that supports, whether it's finance, whatever, maybe that's something that White City could look at, because if it's not adequate and it's not really working, what else could it be? You know, who can help provide that? What's more patient model perhaps? I don't know, but if there's a gap, why not think about how to fill it?
I'll pick the first one first. So manufacturing. I think we're seeing a massive new development of distributed manufacturing, but it's built up on these foundational technologies that are finally getting taken out of the lab. So you have 3D printing, additive manufacturing, it's really taking up. You have things like Desktop Metal, allowing metal 3D printing. We have 3D printing Hackspace here. Those things allow distributed and decentralized manufacturing, rather than thinking of, oh, we have to have one massive site where all the manufacturing takes place for the whole world. It's trying to enable that on a smaller basis, and I think that might be a new trend we're seeing. And then on the second question, the pandemic struck, right? And a lot of city in London, let's say, got scared. They're like, oh, what are the exit horizons for deep tech? What's going to happen? Who stepped in? Well, I mentioned corporate venture, but we forgot to mention crowdfunding. A lot of the companies within the deep tech space are now seeing a new wave of interest within climate mitigation for crowdfunding. And you have players like Crowdcube really picking up in this void. And obviously it's allowing retail investors access to these deals early on. Previously they would have to wait until the IPO stage before they could access these deals. And I think we need to be cautious with saying that is capital at risk. So it's not something that's going to work out every time. It's maybe 1 in 10 that will work out. And we need to educate the retail investors there. But these small mechanisms, let's say the equitable venture, the corporate VCs, we could even have someone like a large pharma player stepping in and crowdfunding. I think those are now stepping into the void, trying to find more fit for purpose financing.
Cheryl, anything to add?
I guess just sort of say watch this space, not me directly, but one of my colleagues and a collaborator of Anna Torwal and I is a professor in our finance group named Ramana Nanda, and he's actually just starting a fascinating project looking at what are the finance options for deep tech specifically, where do we need to innovate within that. So I think, you know, next time around, you know, we'll hear more from him soon about what that might look like.
Okay, well, I think, we've actually run out of time. Sorry, I'm such a terrible chair. I should have realised this about 3 minutes ago. But I think what I do need to say is thank you to our panel for their insights, for their time this morning, and for sharing, you know, where we are and where we need to be going and what approximately we need to be doing to get there. And I suppose the one takeaway I do take is actually Henrik is a bit of a poster child of what's going on, which is, you know, is what you get as much as you know, what you put in, you do get out. And I think, you know, being open and having the right mindset and being engaged and, you know, kind of getting involved has helped. And I think it's really interesting to hear Affinity story on this front. So with that, I think I should also need to say thank you to all the speakers and all to our audience. There's lunch outside, but before you all go running out, I need to flag up that Upstream is also having an Impact and Innovation Showcase. This is going to be purely online, Thursday from 11 to 12 o'clock, and we've got 5 or 6 companies which are based in Hammersmith and Fulham who are going to tell you about, you know, the tech and the science and the interesting products. In fact, we've got somebody dialing in from South Korea, I think somewhere else as well. So that's a virtual world for you. It's all taking place here in a way. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you a bit more during the lunch break.
Thank you.